Okay, let's unpack this. Right now, somewhere on your social media feed, an influencer is probably looking dead into a camera,
Uh,
right?
Almost definitely.
Yeah, and they're holding up this sleek little bottle of white powder and making just a wild promise. They're telling you that the capsules inside are like the ultimate biological cheat code.
Right, the classic fountain of youth pitch.
Exactly. A literal fountain of youth that's going to reverse your biological age, cure your fatigue, and basically make you immortal. But if you step out of that marketing ecosystem and actually look at the clinical data,
Which is what we're doing today.
right, the
Yeah.
gold standard human trials in journals like Science and Nature, you see a very different reality. I mean, this pill isn't making 25-year-olds live forever.
No, it absolutely is not.
But it is, helping 65-year-olds walk a little bit faster and process glucose better. So, welcome to our deep dive into the source material on NMN, or nicotinamide mononucleotide.
It is a mouthful. It really is. Today, our mission is ruthless. We are cutting through the noise. We're tossing out the rodent data, the Petri dish experiments, and of course, the influencer testimonials.
Good riddance.
Yeah. We want to treat this less like magic and more like an A/B test for your own body. We are focusing exclusively on the highest tier of human evidence, like the meta-analyses from 2024 and 2025, to find out what this actually does inside a human body.
And, the human data tells a really fascinating, highly specific, and slightly more modest story than the internet would have you believe.
Modest is probably a good thing here.
Right. We have to strip away the noise of those conflicting, low-quality studies and just look solely at what is rigorously proven.
So what does that picture actually look like?
Well, when you look at those recent massive meta-analyses you mentioned, a clear picture emerges of an intervention that acts way less like magic and much more like a highly targeted physiological tool. Okay, let's figure out how that tool actually works. Because if we want to know whether this compound is worth your time or your money, we first have to establish what it's actually trying to do inside our cells.
That's the perfect place to start.
Like, what is NMN physically trying to do when you swallow it?
So NMN is fundamentally a precursor. It's the raw building block for a molecule called NAD+.
Which stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, right?
Exactly. And you literally cannot survive without NAD+. It is a vital coenzyme present in every single living cell.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It facilitates cellular energy metabolism. It's required to repair damaged DNA. And crucially for our conversation today, it activates a family of proteins called sirtuins.
Okay, wait. I see sirtuins mentioned all over the longevity research in our stack. What do they actually do?
Think of sirtuins as your cellular maintenance crew. Their job is to regulate cellular health, dial down inflammation, and keep your DNA, tightly spooled and protected.
Sounds important.
Extremely. But here's the biological catch. Sirtuins are entirely NAD dependent.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning they only function when there is enough NAD+ available in the cell to power them.
So if sirtuins are the maintenance mechanics, NAD+ is basically the payroll.
I like that analogy, yes.
If the cell runs out of NAD cache, the mechanics just stop showing up to work and the cellular machinery starts breaking down.
That is a really accurate way to visualize it. And unfortunately, as we age, our natural production of NAD+ plummets across all of our tissues.
The payroll dries up.
Payroll dries up.
Yeah.
So the fundamental hypothesis behind taking an NMN supplement is that by flooding the body with the raw precursor material, your cells will synthesize more NAD+.
They pay the sirtuins and restore that youthful level of cellular maintenance.
Precisely.
Which begs the obvious first question, though. When a human being swallows a capsule of NMN, does it actually convert into NAD+? Because, lots of supplements just get destroyed by stomach acid.
Right, they never even reach the bloodstream. But the clinical literature is incredibly clear on this point.
Oh, really?
Yeah, across more than a dozen human randomized controlled trials involving over 500 participants, oral NMN safely and reliably elevates blood NAD+ levels.
Okay, that's a pretty robust sample size.
It is. When tested at effective doses ranging from 250 to 900 milligrams per day, researchers see a clear dose-dependent spike in blood NAD+. We know for a fact that the molecule gets absorbed.
Okay, but I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
Go for it.
Think of NAD plus like the battery power for your smartphone, right?
Okay.
And the NMN pill is the charger cable.
Okay, I follow.
The trials are proving that when you plug the cable in, the battery percentage goes up. But just because my phone says 100% battery doesn't mean the apps run faster.
That's a very fair point. Right.
If my phone's operating system is glitchy, a full battery doesn't fix a broken system. So does raising NAD+ actually translate to feeling better or functioning better?
What's fascinating here is that you've isolated the exact discrepancy we see in the clinical data. Biochemical target engagement like successfully raising the NAD levels does not automatically equal a functional clinical outcome.
Because putting premium fuel into a car doesn't mean the transmission suddenly works.
Exactly. To see if the fuel actually repairs the machinery, we have to look at the sickest populations first, where the cellular machinery is, actively failing.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the metabolic data then. Because looking at our source stack, this is where the strongest clinical signal lies.
It's some of the most rigorous science we have on the topic.
Let's talk about that 2021 landmark trial published in the journal Science by Yoshino and colleagues.
Hmm.
They didn't study healthy biohackers in their 20s, right?
No, not at all. They specifically recruited 25 overweight or obese postmenopausal women who had prediabetes.
And they gave them what, 250 milligrams a day?
Yes, 250 milligrams of NMN per day for 10 weeks. And they chose that demographic intentionally because a pre-diabetic system is under massive metabolic stress.
Right.
The skeletal muscle in these women was highly insulin resistant. And the result of the trial was a roughly 25% improvement in skeletal muscle insulin sensitivity.
Wait, how did they measure that? Because 25% is a massive number. Did they just do a standard fasting blood draw or something?
No, they used a procedure called the hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamp.
That sounds intense.
It is the absolute gold standard in metabolic research. It's an invasive, highly complex test where researchers simultaneously infuse the patient with insulin and glucose over several hours.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it lets them see exactly how much glucose the muscle tissue takes up. It leaves basically no room for error or statistical noise.
So they proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that the muscle was processing sugar better. But how? Like, what did the NAD actually do to the muscle cell to fix the problem?
Well, in a pre-diabetic patient, the muscle cells essentially become deaf to insulin. Insulin is knocking on the door of the cell, trying to let glucose inside, but the cellular lock is jammed. The glucose ends up backing up in the bloodstream, which is what causes high blood sugar.
Right, the classic mechanism of diabetes.
Exactly. And what the researchers found is that the NMN enhanced insulin signaling and upregulated specific genes responsible for remodeling the structure of the muscle cell.
It essentially rebuilt the cellular lock.
Yes. The NAD+ gave the cell the biological resources it needed to repair its own insulin receptors, allowing the glucose to finally enter the cell.
That is fascinating, that NAD acts like a biological repair kit for the doorknob. But we need to bring up a massive caveat here. Based on those 2024 and 2025 meta-analyses.
Right, the healthy adult data.
Yeah, when they looked at 12 randomized controlled trials of generally healthy non-diabetic adults taking NMN, it did absolutely nothing for their fasting glucose or their HbA1c.
Or their lipid profiles, for that matter. It didn't budge the needle at all.
So if my metabolism is perfectly fine, does taking this pill just mean I'm going to have, like, really expensive NAD-rich urine?
Well, from a metabolic standpoint, yes. And biological logic dictates why.
How so?
If you give NMN to a healthy 30-year-old whose metabolism is already running efficiently, their insulin sensitivity is sitting at its biological ceiling. There is no broken doorknob to fix.
Ah, I see.
The extra NAD+ might be floating around in the system, but the machinery doesn't require a physiological rescue.
So it's not a universal fix.
Right. It acts as a targeted intervention for age-related decline or specific metabolic stress, not just a universal upgrade for a healthy system.
Okay, so we've established it repairs metabolic signaling in a pre-diabetic muscle, but for the listener tuning in right now, they probably want to know how that cellular repair translates to actual physical movement.
Daily energy and output.
Exactly. Does this mean they'll run faster on a treadmill? Will an older adult have an easier time getting out of a chair?
The physical output data hinges entirely on the age and activity level of the user. Let's examine the amateur runner data first.
Okay, what do they find there?
A 6-week trial administered varying doses of NMN from 300 to 1,200 milligrams per day to amateur runners. And the researchers observed a dose-dependent increase in aerobic capacity and oxygen utilization.
Which is basically the equivalent of VO2 max, right?
Exactly. Specifically, it improved their ventilatory threshold.
Let's break down that jargon for a second. What exactly is the ventilatory threshold?
Your ventilatory threshold is the tipping point during a run where your breathing suddenly becomes heavy and labored. It's when your muscles are demanding more oxygen than your cardiovascular system can comfortably supply.
Right, when the lactic acid starts to build up and your legs feel like lead.
Yes. And what the data showed is that the extra NAD+ help the mitochondria inside the muscle cells process oxygen more efficiently.
So the muscles got better biological gas mileage out of every breath.
Precisely, pushing that point of exhaustion further down the road.
That makes total sense for someone actively stressing their cardiovascular system. But what about someone who isn't running marathons?
When researchers ran trials on generally healthy older adults, typically using 250 milligrams a day for 12 weeks, they tracked metrics like walking speed or gait speed and lower limb function.
And did it help?
It did. The NMN group showed a modest but highly consistent preservation of gait speed and better lower limb function. It didn't magically synthesize new muscle tissue like a steroid, but it improved the function of the muscle mass they already possessed.
Which is a critical factor for maintaining independence as you get older. But, the physical benefits in the literature don't stop at locomotion. Let's talk about the sleep data.
Yes, the fatigue studies.
A 12-week trial in older adults tracked subjective sleep quality and daytime fatigue. And they saw a noticeable reduction in afternoon drowsiness and deeper sleep at night. But the detail I cannot stop thinking about is the dosing protocol.
The timing nuance.
Yeah, the people who saw the best sleep benefits were the ones who took their NMN in the afternoon. It totally shatters how we conventionally view supplements.
It really does. The afternoon dosing finding is perhaps one of the most important practical insights we have.
Right, because we're conditioned to just swallow a multivitamin with our morning coffee and assume the body figures it out. Why does taking this specific powder in the afternoon change how you sleep at night?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it all comes down to circadian biology, our biological clocks.
Okay.
The specific enzymes that synthesize NAD+ inside your body and the sirtuins that rely on it, they operate on a strict 24-hour cycle. They ebb and flow.
So they aren't just turned on all the time.
No, NAD+ levels naturally peak during our active daylight hours and drop at night. In an older adult, that daily peak is blunted.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. By administering the NMN precursor in the afternoon, we are artificially creating a sharp biochemical peak that mimics a youthful daytime signal.
The body receives a loud, clear message that it is daytime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, in turn, reinforces the contrasting signal that night is for deep restorative sleep.
Man, biology is so tied to circadian rhythms. It's not just what you take, but when you take it. So we've established that NMN helps a pre-diabetic process glucose, it helps an athlete utilize oxygen, and it helps an older adult walk better and sleep deeper.
Very tangible, evidence-based benefits.
Incredible benefits. But let's be honest, none of that is immortality. Where is the disconnect between the muscle data we're reading and the marketing claims that this pill will push human lifespan past 120 years?
It's a massive leap, to put it mildly.
If the lifespan extension data is all based on laboratory mice, aren't we just paying for incredibly expensive mouse medicine?
I appreciate the skepticism, and honestly, that is a scientifically accurate critique. As of this moment, there is absolutely zero human clinical evidence that NMN extends the maximum human lifespan. Zero. No evidence it reduces all-cause mortality or prevents neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or dementia either. All those sweeping longevity claims you see online are entirely extrapolated from rodent and animal models.
It's the classic trap of modern health media. Someone reads a headline about a mouse living 30% longer and assumes it translates perfectly to a human.
Exactly. But we simply lack the adequately powered 20-year human trials required to track hard clinical endpoints like heart attacks, cancer incidence, or absolute age of death.
So what does this all mean for us?
Well, it means we have to clearly separate the concept of health span from lifespan.
Right.
Lifespan is just the raw number of years your heart beats. Health span is the portion of those years spent free from chronic disease with high physical and cognitive function.
So improving muscle insulin sensitivity, walking faster, sleeping better, those are health span improvements.
Yes. NMN appears to improve the quality of the years you have, but we have no proof it adds more years to the clock. While it's mechanistically plausible as an anti-aging tool, we just don't have the proof yet.
So we need to align our expectations with the actual science. It's a tool for health span. But if you're listening and you want to experiment with this tool, say, to help with afternoon fatigue or workout recovery, how do you navigate the dosage and safety protocols?
Safety is a great place to start. The short-term safety data in humans is highly robust and well tolerated.
What kind of doses are we talking about?
Across multiple trials testing oral doses all the way up to 1250 and even 2,000 milligrams per day for up to 24 weeks, researchers observed no serious adverse events.
Wow, 2,000 milligrams is a lot.
It is. But it didn't elevate liver enzymes, it didn't spike blood pressure, and the side effect profile was virtually indistinguishable from the placebo groups.
But just because your body can tolerate a massive dose doesn't mean it's actually biologically useful. What is the evidence-backed sweet spot?
The human trials consistently point to an effective range between 250 and 600 milligrams per day.
Okay.
For an older adult prioritizing physical mobility and sleep architecture, 250 milligrams has the most repeated support in the literature.
And for the higher end?
For an amateur athlete aiming to maximize aerobic capacity or someone trying to aggressively spike their pure systemic NAD plus levels, the 600 milligram range appears optimal.
And if someone's taking that dose, they want to make sure every single milligram actually makes it into their bloodstream.
Absolutely. Absorption is key.
Which brings me to a brand new clinical crossover study in our stack about bioenhancers. It completely changes the absorption math. The researchers gave healthy volunteers 500 milligrams of NMN, but they combined it with just 5 milligrams of a patented black pepper extract called bioperine.
Ah, yes, the piperine study.
How did that tiny addition of pepper extract change the lab work?
The pharmacological shift was significant. The group taking the NMN paired with the bioperine saw their maximum serum NAD concentration reach 282 picomoles per milliliter.
Compared to what?
Compared to just 246 for the group taking NMN alone. The researchers proved that the pepper extract significantly increased the overall area under the curve, or AUC.
Okay, can you define area under the curve for us really quickly?
Sure. Area under the curve is just a pharmacokinetics term. It's a mathematical way of measuring the total cumulative amount of the drug that successfully enters the bloodstream and remains active over time.
Got it. So a higher AUC means your body absorbed more of the compound and held onto it longer.
Precisely.
But why does black pepper do that? That sounds crazy.
Well, bioperine contains an active compound called piperine. Think of the digestive enzymes in your gut and your liver like bouncers at a nightclub.
Okay, I love a good nightclub analogy.
Their entire job
Okay.
is to identify foreign molecules and kick them out or break them down before they can enter the VIP section, which is your bloodstream.
Right.
Piperine temporarily distracts the bouncers. It briefly inhibits those specific breakdown enzymes,
Right.
allowing the NMN to sneak past the velvet rope intact and convert into NAD+.
That is an incredible biological hack. You take a cutting-edge longevity molecule synthesized in a lab, and you pair it with an ancient Ayurvedic spice to trick your gut into absorbing more of it.
It's a great optimization strategy. But, this raises an important question regarding long-term safety.
Right, the giant looming unknown.
Exactly. While the short-term safety profile up to 6 months is excellent, we are operating in the dark beyond that horizon. We simply do not possess the clinical data to know what happens to the human body when you artificially pin NAD plus levels to their maximum every single day for 5 or 10 consecutive years.
Will it downregulate the body's natural production? We don't know.
Will it fuel unwanted cellular growth? We don't know that either. Therefore, from a strictly scientific perspective, taking NMN should be treated as a short-term, monitored experiment. Run a cycle for a few months, track your metrics, and evaluate.
Evaluate if it actually moves the needle for your body. I think that's the perfect way to bring all the pieces of this deep dive together. NMN is a reliable way to boost cellular NAD+. It is not snake oil.
Not at all.
But it's also not a magical immortality pill that will let a healthy young person live forever. Where it genuinely shines is in offering tangible, evidence-based benefits. It helps older adults maintain their mobility. It gives amateur athletes an edge in aerobic capacity, and it repairs the cellular machinery in specific metabolic conditions like prediabetes.
It acts as the biological fuel for your cellular maintenance crew. But, as we established, machinery still requires a stimulus to do the actual work.
Exactly. And that is why we always have to remind you that supplements are just that, supplemental. NMN can be a phenomenal addition to your protocol if you fall into one of those demographics, but it shouldn't replace the foundational pillars.
Right. Sleep, exercise, diet.
You cannot out-supplement chronic sleep deprivation or a completely sedentary lifestyle. You have to build the foundation first, which leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to carry into your day.
Oh, I'm ready.
We know from the clinical trials that NMN works by mimicking some of the cellular effects of intense physical exercise and fasting, right? By raising NAD+ and turning on those sirtuins.
Yes, it essentially tricks your cells into thinking they are working incredibly hard.
Right. But it makes me wonder, what happens to us when science inevitably figures out how to perfectly bottle the biological rewards of a grueling, sweat-drenched workout? If we can just swallow a capsule, to get the metabolic benefit of a hard run? Will we eventually lose the psychological resilience and the mental toughness that comes from actually doing the hard work?
That is a deeply philosophical question.
Something to chew on the next time you find yourself lacing up your running shoes. Keep questioning the claims, keep learning the mechanisms, and keep digging into the science. Until next time.